Tell us about Petra Trust, what you do, and then we'll zoom in on the pension scheme and look at the 3-tier pension scheme and how it affects you and I. Okay. Welcome again.
Thank you very much for having me. So a little bit about Petra Trust. We're pension trustees. And as you mentioned, there are 3 different mandatory service providers under the new Pension Act. Those are trustees, custodians, and fund managers. Trustees manage the pension schemes. They are the ones responsible for every outcome of the pension scheme. In Tier 2, they're going to be appointed by companies who set up occupational pension schemes managed by trustees. In Tier 3, individuals can select a trustee of their choice to manage their personal pensions, which are voluntary. So that's the role of the trustee. Once that trustee has been appointed, it is now his mandate to appoint a custodian to hold the assets of the pension scheme and fund managers to provide investment advice. Those are the 3 main functions of this new 3-tier pension scheme.
How different is it from the old scheme? And we're not talking about the Cap 30. States already had a scheme ongoing that was different from the Cap 30 scheme.
Yes.
What are the distinctions between the old one and the new one?
Okay, so under the old pension scheme, there was just one provider, and that provider gave you a defined benefit pension. And what that means basically is that it doesn't matter what the investments do under that pension scheme. The pension provider has given you a promise that at the end of your working life, they're going to pay you a certain amount based on certain conditions that you have to meet. So it's irrespective of the performance of investments. The new 3-tier scheme has added in what we call a defined contribution scheme. What you know for sure in that concept is that there's a certain amount that you're putting into the scheme for management. The outcome depends on how well those schemes are managed. And so what the government did was to break up what was going to SNIT and give them a smaller portion of that and make 5% of the total available for private sector pension providers to manage under a defined contribution scheme.
Okay,
yes.
Hence the 3-tier.
Hence the 3-tier.
Right. Tell us about the pension scheme in general. I mean, why should one contribute to a scheme to begin with, and what is one to expect?
Well, we all know that at a certain point in time, we're going to come to the end of our working life. We can continue to be of benefit to the society, but typically it will be at a lower activity level. It's going to be very rare for you to see a 60-year-old doing the same kind of hours or providing the same kind of activity as a 20-year-old. So there's going to be a time when you slow down. If you have not built enough wealth at that point to see you into your gray years, there might be a problem. And so it's a social situation that needs to be managed. Every society needs to think carefully through how it provides for its senior citizens. The advantage we have in Africa today is that most of our citizens are very, very young, and so there's a continuing safety net. Those young contributors can continue to provide assets that the older people can benefit from, especially given the culture that we live in. But over time, that changes, and people age. And they have to start looking out for their own retirement out of their own assets. That is why this new pension scheme is so important.
It's so important.
It is extremely important. I think it's probably the biggest change that has happened in finance in this country since SEC was created and the stock exchange came into being.
Interesting. Let's take a look at how the private sector is managing the 5% that has been awarded them. Yes. And how it will impact on the final take-home of the pensioner.
Yes. It's, I'll step back and give a slight philosophical overview about how all of this works, because I think it's important. Most Ghanaians earn a salary, or Ghanaians in the formal sector earn a salary. In general, the growth of your salary typically lags behind the growth of assets that you own. So people who provide money or who invest will typically earn more or grow their assets much faster than somebody who's earning a salary. What SNIT did, which is a defined benefit, was that every worker was going to get a payout at the end of their lives based on the salary that they had earned in their lifetime. We know that in this part of the world it's low, and given what I said about growth, you're not going to see a lot of appreciation in that salary compared to people who own assets. So what this new pension scheme has done is that it is making every Ghanaian worker an owner. By putting the money into a defined contribution pension scheme managed by pension trustees, we're going to take that money and invest it in different assets. And so every Ghanaian worker who is now involved in these pension schemes is now an owner. What we expect is that the assets that these Ghanaian workers now own will grow much faster than the growth of salaries, if managed properly. And that if is a big one. Pension trustees need to do their job extremely well.
Are you prepared to do that? Are you ready?
We are more than ready. We've been ready for a long time. It's not even a
year yet, is it? I mean, the scheme just started last Monday 19th.
Yes, basically on Monday we were all licensed, and so now we're going through and inviting companies to select our schemes and to select us as service providers. Once that is done, all of the assets that have been accumulated at the Bank of Ghana, as you know, this thing started being collected in January 2010. So all of those assets will be transferred to the custody accounts of pension trustees, and then we can begin to manage it as appropriate for the purposes for which they've been set up.
When you talk about encouraging companies or inviting companies to join, buy into your trust,
yes,
what do you mean? Can I say that I want to be managed, my pension scheme funds should be managed by Petra Trust, and therefore that disassociates me from the SNITS one?
Yes, we'll talk about
or the actual pool goes to SNITS, and then SNITS does what it does. And so even though I'm involved, I'm not that involved. No,
SNITS is not involved in the Tier 2 decision. Now, in the last 2 years, SNITS has provided a very significant service to Tier 2 by being the entity that has collected the funds. So up till now, every company has been writing 2 checks when it is contributing for its pensions. 13.5 goes to SNITS, which is SNITS portion. And then the 5% has been collected by SNIT, processed by SNIT, and submitted to the Bank of Ghana for the temporary accounts. Now that trustees have been appointed, that money will be moved to the trustees.
The 5%?
The 5%.
Okay.
And then going forward, the trustees that are selected by every company are now going to receive that 5% check.
Now that's
directly
clear.
Into their custody account.
So depending on whether I'm with trustee A or B,
yes,
my investments or my pension benefits will go up depending on how the performance is done by A or B.
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
Now it's business, purely business.
That is exactly what it is.
So we must be well informed to decide where we want to pitch our tent.
I think so. Well, I know so.
Do explain further, please.
So the additional thing that has been created by this new pension structure is that there is competition. So before SNIT was by itself, it is very, very difficult when you're the only game in town to start excelling beyond what you're used to.
Can rather mediocre.
Well, you get comfortable. And what this thing has done is that it has created a competitive arena for all of the private sector trustees to compete in and all the private sector fund managers to compete in. There are 9 of us. If Petra Trust does not do its job well, there are 8 other trustees who will step in and be very, very happy to take away our clients. So there's that incentive for us to perform extremely well, not just on the investment side, which is important, but on the service side as well, providing statements, making sure that we have a staff who take calls and answer questions for all the workers in this country who are going to call us and ask those questions.
So in about 5 years, I can call Petra and say, excuse me, sir, I've been contributing to the funds. You know, I know that I've been on your trust fund for 5 years, and I'm wondering how much do I have right now, giving my assets, right?
Well, the way we're going to do it...
Is that a fair enough question?
You don't have to wait for 5 years for that. And that's another advantage that this new 3-tier pension scheme brings. There's a lot more clarity about what is happening in your pension schemes. Every quarter, we're going to send you a statement. And that statement is going to list what your fund stood at the beginning of the previous quarter, how much you've contributed, how well we have done for you in terms of the investment return, and so what your funds at the end of this quarter are. And so you're going to get that every quarter, and you can make decisions based on that.
I know in other countries, sometimes you can actually say, you know what, I'm taking my pension out. And you just take it. Cash your pension means you don't have any pension. That's up to you, right?
Yes.
Nobody forces you to keep your pension going.
Yes.
Can I do that also here?
Absolutely not.
Why not? After I've built a good enough sum of money, can I say I want to take it away and go invest it in something else?
No, you cannot.
Okay.
There are certain conditions under which you can take your money out of your Tier 2 or Tier 3 pension. But what the government has done with this law is it has gone into a contract with you. the government has decided that they're going to forego taxes on the contributions that you make into Tier 2 and Tier 3 pensions. In exchange for that, in Tier 2, you need to keep the money up till retirement.
So they can also roll it over?
No, we do. Well, it's no longer with the government, it's with the private sector. But they want you to have something when you retire. Because at the end of it all, if a significant portion of this country's population is poor at retirement, it becomes the government's problem.
It does.
Yes. So they're going to forego some of the taxes and insist that because they are doing that, you should keep your money until retirement and have something to work with when you get there. In Tier 3, you don't have to wait till retirement. Tier 3, you only have to wait in the formal sector for 10 years, in the informal sector for 5.
I think that's what I was trying to drive at,
yeah.
You know, the interesting bit. Now, depending on how much I have in Tier 3 and how much I'm contributing, I can take it away in 10 years or 20 years or 15 years.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes, because Tier 3 is voluntary. It's not mandatory.
That's the informal sector.
The informal and formal sector.
So if informal sector contributors can actually say that I'm contributing to Tier 3 instead of Tier 2.
Oh, yes.
So we have that choice to make.
Yes, up to a certain limit.
How
the
much?
government is not willing to forego taxes on everything.
Okay. How much contribution then can I make? What is the limit?
The limit is a total of 35% of your salary. So the mandatory portion, Tier 1 and Tier 2 together, make up 18.5% of your salary. It is up to you now to contribute more into Tier 3 and get additional tax savings. However, you can only add an additional 16.5% to make a total of
slow it down for us. There's a regular this is 18%. 18.5%.
Yes.
And so we do 13.5 with the with SNIT and 5% with the various trusts like Petra Trust.
Like Petra,
yeah. And then if I want to add more, I move to Tier 3.
Yes.
I can no longer invest extra in the Petra Trust, for example.
Petra provides both Tier 2 and Tier 3 schemes.
Okay.
So you can
I cannot invest more into Tier 2.
You cannot invest more into Tier 2. Okay, Tier 2 is fairly stringent in that it's 5% and you cannot touch it except for special conditions until you retire. Tier 3, which is voluntary, has a shorter lockout time period, which is 10 years in the formal sector and 5 years in the informal sector. So in the case of Tier 3, it's really an encouragement for you to invest long term. You can take it out before retirement.
Most interesting.
Yeah.
It's a business venture now.
It is.
Can you tell us how we can actually come over and see you and do this?
So for Tier 2, the decision as to which trustee is going to manage the scheme is made by the company.
The company you work for?
Yes, the company you work for.
Based on how you pitch your sale?
Exactly. So we're out there talking to every company in Ghana pretty much, telling them about Petra, telling them about what it means to be licensed, what our experience and our expertise is in this area, and how we can manage, or how we are best positioned to manage the schemes on their behalf. So the company will make a decision. That decision will be based on their own internal structures, how the decision-making happens in the company, whether it's the board, employees, management, it's up to them. They will select a trustee who will then manage the scheme on behalf of the employees.
What happens if I change employers?
If you change employers, your previous trustee is required to move your assets into a temporary account until you have instructed them where they should move those funds. So they're going to have to move it to another Tier 2 scheme at your new employer. And so the money will follow you as you go around. If for any reason you decide that you're getting out of the workforce, you can then select your own Tier 2 scheme and ask them to move it there. And that money will continue to be managed for you in Tier 2.
Okay.
So it's portable.
There was a bit about people who are 55 years now, workers who are 55 years now, who are still on, who are still on the old scheme and are not, you know, they don't have to get on the new 3-tier scheme. Can you explain further on that?
So when the Act was implemented, people who were 55 had a choice, because 55 really represents early retirement under SNIT. So they had the choice to essentially select the early retirement and then move fully to the new Tier 2 and Tier 3. I'm not sure how many people made that choice, but basically that choice was given. I'm sure most people decided to stay and continue their service up to 60 and get their SNIT benefits as well. So that choice was given, but I'm not sure how many people took it.
Okay, so let's take a look at the custodians again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The function of the custodian is to hold the assets. In reality, even though the trustee manages the scheme, he never touches the money. You will send your check as a company to the custodian for the credit of the trustee's account there, or for the scheme that is being managed. And then the trustee will give instructions on how that scheme is supposed to be invested to the custodian. The fund manager will provide his advice as well. So those are the two service providers who advise on investments. But the money is touched by neither of them. It is always with the custodian. As you can see, all of the custodians are banks. And so they have expertise in holding cash and keeping cash. We don't, but we know how to invest.
And so the worker will not be faced with allegations of and worries of their funds being mismanaged. In the past, there has been issues with that.
Yes, mismanagement is a fairly broad term. In terms of the security of the cash itself, it's at a bank.
In terms of how the funds are being grown,
yes, in terms of the investment decisions,
and where
right?
the interest, is going, whose pocket is going.
That is the risk that you face in a defined contribution scheme, where what you get at the end is based on the return. Okay. At the beginning, the NPRA, the National Pensions Regulatory Authority, has made the investment guidelines fairly strict and fairly conservative. There's not a whole lot that trustees can do today. Okay, and that is to make sure that the system works, people know what they're doing, and that the money is protected. As we go along and trustees and fund managers show and demonstrate their expertise, we expect that the investment guidelines will be relaxed to allow for more diversity in the investments and more risk-taking. These are long-term funds. They're not meant to be in money markets or short-term securities. They're meant to be invested in a very diversified portfolio with appropriate amounts of risk. And as time goes on and we demonstrate our expertise, we expect that the guidelines will be relaxed.
As a matter of curiosity, where would you be looking to invest the funds? What are the areas?
Today or in the future?
Right now.
Right now, we're only allowed to invest in government securities, in listed equities, in fixed deposits and money market instruments, in corporate credit of a certain type listed, in mortgage-backed securities and real estate investment trusts, which should also be listed. So all of these requirements ensure that there's some liquidity in the assets that we're buying.
When you say listed, means they're on the market?
Listed on an exchange that is registered with SEC. Okay, so we're not allowed to buy private equity or put our money in companies that are not listed or instruments that are not listed. The assumption here is that the listing requirement provides a certain safeguard. Companies who are being listed or securities who are being listed are expected to meet a certain minimum requirement. And so that provides some comfort to the decision makers about the quality of those companies. But at the end of it all, the investment decision sits with the trustees. You need to select a trustee who knows how to select those investments and make the right choices.
You will tell us how to select the trustee who knows how to make the right choices when we come back. Please, let me inform you that we did invite the NPRA and the SNITs to be on the show, but unfortunately, they couldn't make it. We're rather sorry about that, but I'm sure Petra will do a good enough job on the matter. So do show us.
Unfortunately, we can't speak for them.
Unfortunately, but let us know how we can actually source well for those who would invest our interests.
Okay. I think the decision to basically pick a trustee is in two phases. The first is the license. So the NPRA has gone through a fairly strict selection process to ensure that the companies who are coming in and providing these trustee services at least meet a certain minimum in terms of investment, capitalization, technology, infrastructure, software, and people. So we've gone through that process now, and that has been established. So the 9 companies who have been chosen or selected or approved as corporate trustees at least meet that minimum. What companies need to do now is to identify which of these trustees has the most expertise or can provide them with the best service. At the end of it all, we're all going to sit in front of them and make a case for how we invest, how we set up our investment policy, how we do asset allocation, how we select fund managers and custodians, and how we're going to do the fund administration to ensure that every single scheme participant is going to get his statement, is going to know what's going on in the account, and when they have questions and they call, there's somebody at the end of the line who will pick it up and answer intelligently. Those are the things that we're going to try to convince companies about.
That you should tell the employer what they should look out for in selecting someone who's offering the services that Petra is offering. What are the key notes, so to speak?
The key notes, I believe, are a very good understanding of what the services the trustee is required to provide. And once you understand what those services are, you can query the trustee about those services. The trustee is responsible for formulating the investment policy for the scheme. He's responsible for the asset allocation decision, which is how much do I put in stocks versus bonds versus real estate versus money markets versus foreign securities, etc., etc. It's a very important investment decision, and your trustee needs to demonstrate that they understand it and know how to do it. The third thing is the ability to select fund managers and custodians. It's not as simple as saying, how much did the fund manager return last year, and so we're going to pick them. There's a fairly involved process that the trustee has to go through when selecting a fund manager. And
so the employer has the responsibility on being informed in making the decisions?
No, but he needs to know how the trustee makes that decision. What is the process and what is their expertise? He needs to ask the question, Mr. Trustee, how are you going to select your fund manager? And he needs to hear what you're going to have to say and make sure that it makes sense. And then the final thing is the fund administration.
And what would make sense if that question were to be put to you?
Well, Petra will know exactly how to answer that question when the companies ask us. We've been doing this for a very, very long time.
Right.
The final thing is the fund administration, which is providing statements to scheme participants, correctly calculating the value of the funds, ensuring that there's somebody at the end of the line when a scheme participant calls who can answer intelligently about what's going on in that individual's pension scheme. So if you can ask your trustee about how they approach each of these 4 functions, and you get an intelligent response and compare it to what all of the other trustees are telling you, you can make a good decision about what corporate trustee to select.
In the interest of the employees.
In the interest of the employees, exactly. Having said that, your choice is not just with corporate.
Is what we're looking for.
The best interest.
Yes.
The company has to make a decision in the best interest. Having said that, the corporate trustees are not the only trustee a company can choose. There are other kinds of trustees or trustee structures that a company can decide to go with. But we come in to provide our corporate trustee services.
Previously, there were agitations over how funds were managed and how much people were getting.
Yes.
How can we guarantee? You've implied that there's a possibility that the 3-tier system can improve,
yes,
the services of the benefit of the retiree.
Yes. Yes.
Can you touch on it? Let's see if we can really hook on to that.
Okay. I think well, the fundamental problem at the end of it all is that all of these pension schemes are based on the salary that the individual is earning. So if that salary is not significant, we're starting from a low base and we'll continue to have an issue, right? However, what this 3-tier pension scheme does is it turns workers into owners. And so if, for example, you take a year like 2010, where the stock market in Ghana returned 30%, there is nobody's salary that was going up, or for the most part, it was going to be very difficult to find an employee whose salary is going up by 30%. So that increase in their assets, if they were in a tier 2 or tier 3 pension scheme, is a significant improvement for them in a way that will not be matched by salary growth. So that's the first fundamental thing. You're making every Ghanaian worker an owner of companies or of bonds or other kinds of securities. Secondly, it introduces competition. So you have competition at every part of the tier 2 and tier 3 schemes. I actually think that SNIT is also now in a competitive environment. If you go to their website right now, it looks completely different because trustees are coming in with websites and we're all providing pensions. So there's going to be a comparison even between tier 1 and tier 2, and everybody's going to step up.
In the meantime, SNIT will still be working with its 13.5%.
Yes, it will. It will. And I think that's the beauty of this structure. The 13.5% is basically the defense. Regardless of what happens in tier 2 or tier 3, at least you have that. It is going to be managed by SNIT. The government has promised you a certain return, and if you stay in it for long enough, when you retire, there's something you have. But the tier 2 and the tier 3 is what will make the real difference.
Right.
That's how it works.
Most interesting. Yeah. As an informal contributor,
yes,
can I directly invest in tier 2 and 3 without going through SNITs?
Yes. So as an informal contributor, you can invest completely in tier 3.
Okay, and forget about SNITs, the 13.5%
exactly.
and the 5%,
exactly.
and move beyond that.
Yes. The government is also saying that we want to bring you in and encourage you to save long term, and we're going to give up taxes on your income. So when you declare your income, you can take 35% of that, which is the same as in the formal sector, and invest it in a scheme. On the tier 3 side, you're only required to keep your money in there for 5 years if you're an informal sector contributor. So that's the benefit that is extended to the informal sector as well. And for Petra Trust, the informal sector is a significant part of our strategy. We look at ourselves as stewards of this nation's assets, and where the majority of this country is informal sector, we definitely need to make sure that they're properly taken care of.
Who do I approach to make my investments as a tier 3 investor?
You will approach any sponsor of a scheme, corporate trustees, or other kinds of trustees who are providing these services. We know that there are a large number of informal sector groups who are putting together schemes for their group members, and those schemes are going to be registered. The trustees will either be corporate trustees or individual trustees, and they'll manage the schemes on behalf of the scheme members.
I realize I'm thinking in terms of an investor already and not a contributor.
Definitely. That's the big difference.
It is really exciting.
You're now involved. It's not a passive thing that happens when you retire. You're going to see your statement every quarter. You will look at it, and if it's not what you want it to be, you have a choice.
And you can even encourage yourself to add more.
You can add more, or you can change your trustee.
It's unfortunate we do not have SNITs here to actually tell us about what they are going to do. Yeah. I mean, what sort of investment they're going to make with their 13.5%. But indeed, it's good that Petra is here.
Thank you.
And they're giving us the confidence to invest in the new 3-tier pension scheme. Yeah. What are some of the other areas that you think that we should know about in terms of public education that would favor both of us? You to enable you sell your service to us, and we to make the right choice.
Okay. So I think the two components of this new law that should be of significant interest to every Ghanaian. The first, as I mentioned, is the tax savings. So let's say you are in a 15% tax bracket. Every 100 cedis that you earn, the government takes 15 cedis. And you take home 85 cedis. What the government is saying is that if you invest that money in a tier 2 or tier 3 scheme, well, tier 2 is mandatory, but if you invest it in a tier 3 scheme, we will not take that 15 cedis from you. You can invest all 100.
Can you run that by me again? Because earlier you said that I had a limit of 35%.
Yes.
So now where comes...
The 35% is how much of your salary you can contribute into these schemes.
Because I don't want to say I'm contributing 60% just to avoid tax. It's not allowed.
Exactly.
Okay, but when it comes to tier 3, it's a different matter.
Tier 3, you can only contribute up to 16.5% of your salary. So there's the 18.5% mandatory and up to 16.5% voluntary.
Okay.
So in that voluntary case where you have 100 cedis and it is part of that 16.5, if you contribute it to a tier 3 scheme, you don't pay taxes. It is a significant benefit that adds up over time. For every 100 cedis, you're taking all of it as opposed to the net that you would have gotten after taxes, and you're investing it into a tier 3 scheme. So in our opinion, if you're a Ghanaian worker and you have any money that you know you won't need for 10 years or that you're investing for a long-term purpose, children's education, university, a house, you should put it into a tier 3 scheme and get that tax advantage. That's the first thing. The second is what
amazing.
It is amazing.
The things we don't know, right?
It's a huge benefit. We should all be excited about this. The second benefit is the mortgage benefit. So we mentioned that in the formal sector, you have to keep your money in the schemes for at least 10 years. But there's a condition under which you can take it out early.
I knew that was coming. It was too lovey-dovey, wasn't it?
That condition is if you're using it to buy your primary residence, or you're using it as the down payment for a mortgage to buy your primary residence. So at any point in time, You can go to your trustee and say, I'm buying a house, I need this money. And at that point in time, you've gotten this significant tax savings, and you can use it to buy a house. So in our opinion, if this is done as well as we expect to do it, a lot of Ghanaians will now have access to enough funds to get a mortgage and buy a house.
It sounds very good, but really, usually when we start things in Ghana, it starts one way and ends up another. Yeah. So what are the guarantees?
There's
and
no
I know
guarantee.
There's no guarantee.
There's
Thank you for being honest with us. So it's a risk we're all taking.
It's a risk we're all taking.
We should accept that it is.
Yes.
How do we enhance your work so that we also benefit? How can we continue to support you? What are the ways that we can support you so that we get the benefit at the end of the day?
I think at the end of it all, the feedback...
In terms of being a contributor.
In terms of being a contributor, you need to encourage your company to really get, to really comply with the requirements of the Act. That's the most important.
In terms of consistent contributions.
Timely information. It's a significant processing job. You have companies with people moving in and out, people taking leave without pay, disability, illness, travel. All of these things are processing complexities that we, the trustees, manage. Companies need to provide this information on a timely basis. They need to provide their contributions by the 14th of every month. That needs to be done. Every single day that your money is not working for you is a day lost.
By the 14th of every month?
By the 14th.
Some companies don't have any returns until the very end of the month and would therefore pay workers
by the 14th of the next month.
The next month. Yeah, now so that's fair.
If the salary is due in January, for example, by the 14th of February, you should have sent your contribution.
Okay. That seems like it's fair.
But we need to encourage the companies to really get involved in this and ensure that their processes work really well with this. And then you need to keep us honest.
How can I also hold my employer responsible?
How can you?
Because it is in your interest, it is in my interest.
Yes. At the end of it all, really, companies' decisions are taken by the employees. No matter how we look at it, at every single level, we can all say that it's the management or it's the board, but if employees get together and have something that they want to say about the scheme, the people who are leading the company will listen, even when it comes to the choice of trustee. At the end of it all, it's your money. That 5% that is coming to the corporate trustee in Tier 2 is essentially your money. And we need to look at it from that perspective. We need to take that amount of interest. We need to keep every trustee accountable for the money that we have given them to manage on our behalf.
So employees association can get together and say, you know what, I've been with this company for 5 years and trustee A is not doing so good and we think we should propose to management that such and such and such.
Definitely. And we don't think you wait for 5 years. We think you do it early.
Of course, we won't wait that long. Public education on the very basic things that we need to do now.
Basically, talk to your company to ensure that they're thinking through the choice of the corporate of the trustee, not corporate, of the trustee. There are a number of different trustee structures that are allowed by the law. Every company should be thinking through which trustee structure works well for them. And then once they've decided on a structure, they need to select the trustees who will make that, the investment decisions. That should be happening now. There's no need to wait. We believe that if we wait too long, the decision will be made for companies, and that is not what any employee wants. As an employee, you should have and exercise that choice that you've been given. So ask your companies to start making the decisions around this and select a trustee. Then we can move forward and ensure that your money is moved from the Bank of Ghana and is invested appropriately in the market.
Thank you very much. Now, Nana Kwame says, I understand government has the power to take from SNITs to fund their projects. How true is it, and how does the scheme ensure that money is taken back? Is that a fair question for Nana Kwame to ask you, since you're not coming from that angle?
Well, I think it's a fair question, but SNIT manages money. And subject to the investment guidelines that it's been given, has the ability to invest it in any projects that it sees fit. We've heard and understand that sometimes they're given instructions. I don't know to what extent it's true, but it is a government-owned institution, and so that should not surprise us if that happens.
I see. Yeah. Okay, so we were on the issue of public education and what we should look out for. Shall we continue with that?
So the first thing, of course, is making sure that your employer is doing the right thing. For most workers in Ghana, the real interest when it comes to the pension schemes happens basically after the trustees have been chosen. They just need to keep a very, very good eye on their contributions that are being transferred from the Bank of Ghana. When they get their contribution statements, they need to verify that the amount is what they expect it to be. I hope that every single worker has been given slips that show what the contributions to SNIT have been over the last 2.5 years, and they need to check and make sure that it matches up. That is how we can start off on a good footing. It would be terrible if 3 years from now, a worker comes and says, the money that was transferred from the Bank of Ghana to my trustee did not match what I was expecting, and we should do something about it. You know, we will try, but it will be much more difficult to do that then than to do that now. So every company, every worker should be interested in that report that they get at that point.
So we have a shared responsibility.
We definitely
and we
do.
can keep up with our track. I mean, our benefits.
Definitely.
You know, how much we're earning and all of that.
We can't be passive about our pensions anymore.
No, we
It is
cannot.
too important. Too important.
We cannot. How does the student come in here? And it might sound a little, you know, to be asking about students when, you know, they haven't started working and they're yet contributing. With a three-tier pension scheme, the new three-tier pension scheme, the students can still access the SNIT loans and still expect to pay the way they used to, or there is some kind of difference now, given that it's changed hands, you know, the way the process goes has changed.
Yeah, so the SNIT is basically a new entity because a new law was passed to create it. But the law did not address the student loan program at all. And so from, as far as we're concerned, that continues to go on in its old structure.
What about the percentages that one is supposed to pay after school? Nothing has changed whatsoever, because it's not possible that this whole scheme can change and that would not be affected.
It's only the retirement part that the pension law of 2008 addressed. It did not address the student loan. So
students can remain comfortable?
I think so. As long as the law that empowered the student loan program hasn't changed, they're comfortable.
What are some of the things that we need to know?
Going forward. I think for this country in general, given the fact that every single worker is now going to be an owner of assets, we need to understand what that means. It is my hope that over time, the asset allocation decision, for example, that is today the trustees, will be taken on by each individual person. But for that to happen, it needs education. You need to know what it means to buy a stock, to buy a bond, or to put your money in real estate. You need to understand that and be able to make a choice for your own specific situation on how you want the assets to be allocated. If, for example, you are 40 years old, but you still want to take a lot of risk because you know that what you have is not sufficient, but you have SNIT. If things don't work out, you can fall back on it. However, you want to take some risk to top up when you get to that point. There's no reason why, with the right education, you shouldn't be able to do that. We really need to get every single worker educated about what these investments mean and how they can take more advantage of it. And this is going to be the catalyst for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Gajepo David says, how I wish I could watch this important discussion to the end, but ECG will not allow me. Total blackout again at Timpoku. I'm so sorry, Gajepo David. ECG, please do allow David next time to watch the show. I'm sure we have other text messages that Nana Kwame says, yes, Nana Kwame, I've read your text already. Okay. Owusuado says, what happens to an individual's contribution when he or she changes jobs? I think I asked that question earlier, but if you would want to remind him, just in case he just, you know, joined us.
Okay, no problem. So when you leave your current place of employment, within 3 months, your accumulated funds will be moved into a temporary account by the previous trustee. And it will be kept in that account until you inform them of what your new employment is and what scheme is associated with that new employment. And then the transfer will be made. So basically, your schemes are portable. You can take them with you when you're changing from one job to another. If you do get into a situation where you're not working, you can move your fund into a Tier 2 scheme of your choice. It doesn't have to be associated with the company you're going to. You can actually move it into a Tier 2 scheme of your choice and keep it there.
Now, that's an interesting area. Even if I'm working and I decide not to go with the bandwagon of my employer, I can do that?
No, you can't.
Now, that's not fair. You just
That's where Tier 3 comes in.
Okay.
So Tier 2 is definitely...
and I don't want to invest more than the 18% that I'm required to.
It probably is not a good idea because you will not get the tax savings anyway. Right? The tax savings is the real reason why you want to do this in the first place. In addition to the fact that the trustees are excellent investors, the tax savings is what you want to do. But the Tier 2 is occupational. It is employer-based, and you're going to have to go with that. Tier 3 is where you have choice. In fact, if you decide that you're choosing any personal pension scheme in Tier 3, offered by any corporate trustee, your employer is mandated by the law to facilitate your contributions to that scheme. So you can basically choose in Tier 3 any scheme and tell your employer to make sure that your money gets there, and they have to.
So then when I'm not working and I remain in Tier 2, how do I justify it? How do I prove that indeed I'm not working? Because then people might take advantage of it. Is it possible?
The money is going to be managed. It's kept at the custodian. It will not leave. At some point when you get to 60, then you can touch it. Or if you decide to buy your primary mortgage, then you can touch that money. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Please do send in your text messages on Facebook. You can also send it right here to us. You can also send a short code 1760. I'll be happy to read them out. Mr. Kofi Finn is here to help us out. Excuse me. Now, I cannot decide I can decide to stay with Tier 2 as and when I please, so long as I'm working under an employer. But with Tier 3, I have the option to do whatever I like, and I can contribute as much as 16% over the 18% that I'm required to. Okay, and I need to know how to choose which trustee to go with, right? I'm just trying to track what you've told us.
Yes, you need to know how to choose which trustee and which product to go with. So the way we see this market evolving is that trustees are going to come out with different Tier 3 products, targeted at different people and with different characteristics.
Let's take a look at the range of people.
Okay. So you could have young, old, informal, formal, different groups. It's basically a marketing strategy for a trustee to decide to set up a scheme targeted at expats, locals. I mean, it's the broad range, right?
Okay, let's take a look at middle income earners, middle age.
Middle income earners, middle age. What a trustee can do is to set up an asset allocation that is appropriate for them. So if it's a middle income, we're assuming that their salary might be okay, and so when they get to the end of their life, SNIT can provide them with something that is okay because it's salary based.
Would I say in Ghana, middle income earner would be like 1,000 Ghana cedis, or that's way too high for our salary scheme? Do you know?
I think in Ghana,
I do not have the benefit.
I think in Ghana, middle income at 1,000 is fair. 1,000 to 3,000 probably of a month, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So that person, because when that person retires, they're at least getting 500 to 1,500 a month on SNIT.
Okay. Oh, that's not bad.
Right.
Over, say, 30 years of contribution.
15 years.
15 years of. Oh, minimum 15 years.
Yes.
That's not bad.
Yeah. So there is.
But it all depends on how you manage
the extra that they get, what can really create wealth for them on top of this 50% of salary that SNIT will give them is what will make the difference. And so if we manage the 5% properly, then at the time they are retiring, they're getting a lump sum, something they can do something with that can be significant. That's the benefit here. And in addition to the fact that it could be significant, you can bequeath it, you can use it to start a business. It's your money. And at retirement, you can get it and decide what you're doing with it. That's why this is so powerful. That's why this is so powerful.
Okay. 3 fundamental things that I need to do tomorrow if I want to get on the scheme?
3 fundamental things. Informal sector.
Informal sector, because the formal sector is clearly structured, so yes, we don't need to be too involved. But involved as an observer?
Yes, as an employee looking at the decisions that your company is taking. Yes. But in tier 3, it's your choice. You are going to go out there and choose a product by a trustee. Right? So the first thing you're going to have to do is to identify what your objective is from an investment perspective. Are you saving for your house? Are you saving only for 10 years because that's what the minimum is for you to get the tax benefit in tier 3? Or are you saving for longer? You have to decide how much risk are you willing to take. So is tier 1 and tier 2 sufficient? In which case you don't take so much risk with tier 3. Or do you need to take more risk in tier 3 to complement what's happening in tier 1 and tier 2? Those are the kinds of questions that you need to ask to decide what kind of investment you're going to make. Once you've done that, you will have to select a trustee. Of the 9 corporate trustees that are out there, which one do you think is best suited to what you're looking for? And which product in their array of products is best suited for what you're looking for? So you're going to have to go to them and ask them these questions. You have 5 products. What is each one meant to do, or what is the objective of each one? This is my risk profile. What would you suggest? And do your own research.
Can I find Petra online?
You can find us at petratrust.com. In fact, we have a website that has a number of resources that we do a lot of research, and so our research articles can be found on the website. There's a calculator on there for anybody who wants to figure out how to calculate the lump sum that you're going to get at the end. You make assumptions about your salary and how it's going to grow, and about the return that the trustee is going to make for you. And then the system is going to calculate what you can expect to get at the end of the investment period. So you can use it to make some of these decisions. We also welcome questions.
So even if I join in at 45, age 45, I can have 15 years to hit 60, age 60, yes, and so I still stand to make some very good gains.
Yes, on tier 1 and tier 2.
Selection of trustees.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That is that if my employer does, or if it's in the informal sector, if I do.
Yes.
And how much.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so very much for coming.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. But if there's something else you want to share, please do. Quickly.
Well,
that I haven't thought to ask you.
I have a general statement.
Please go.
Every Ghanaian should be an owner of assets. We should all be involved in this. And if there is any money that we think we can put away for 5 years if we're in formal sector, or 10 years if we're in the formal sector, we should put it into a tier 3 pension scheme, enjoy the tax benefits and the professional management that trustees are going to do for us.
Okay, quick one. I have a lump sum of 3,000 sitting somewhere and I'm looking for something to do with it. Can I just lump it in there?
Yes, you can, but you won't get the tax benefit because it's not coming out of your salary. However, you can enjoy our professional fund management.
Thank you.